the clockmaker's daughter. They say when someone dies, their clocks stop ticking. But when Elena Westbrook stepped into her father's abandoned clock shop after 20 years, every single clock was still running. Dozens of them, hundreds, maybe ticking, chiming, whispering. The sound wrapped around her like a memory that refused to fade soft, constant and impossible to ignore. She stood in the doorway, a suitcase at her feet, her fingers trembling against the brass doorknob. The shop looked exactly as it did when she was 8 years old. The smell of wood polish and copper oil, the dusty green wallpaper curling at the corners, and that haunting grandfather clock in the back corner with its carved wooden face and silver pendulum swinging like a heartbeat. Her father had died 3 weeks ago. A stroke, the lawyer said, quick and quiet, unlike the man himself. She hadn't spoken to him in over 2 decades, not since the night she ran away. And now, here she was back in Hollowpine, back in this time capsule of silence and dust, to sign some papers, to sell the shop, to leave. But something wasn't right. The clocks, they weren't just ticking. They were off. Each tick came at a slightly different rhythm, like mismatched footsteps in a dark hallway, some faster, some slower. One chimed, though no hour had passed. Another whispered a tune she hadn't heard since childhood, a lullaby her mother used to hum before she disappeared. And then, a sound she couldn't explain. A faint click from the far end of the room. Elena turned slowly. It was the broken clock. The one her father swore had stopped ticking the night her mother left. Now, it was running. Elena walked slowly through the clock shop, as if stepping over fragments of her own memories. Beneath her feet, a thick layer of dust marked each footprint, an accidental map of her unwanted return. She stopped in front of a small walnut mantel clock, its glass scratched and dull. Beneath the dust, it was still ticking, steady, precise, unwavering. A part of her felt oddly angry about that. How could everything here still function while her life had fallen apart? She moved toward the old cashier's counter, where her father had once kept a silver bell to greet customers. It was still there, silent. She tapped it gently, and the ring echoed bright, clear, unchanged by the years. "Welcome back, Elena," she muttered to herself, voice tinged with sarcasm and bitterness. Behind the counter was a narrow door leading to the repair room, her father's sacred space. She pushed it open gently. It was unlocked. Inside lay a miniature world of gear springs, magnifying glasses, and hundreds of tiny tools arranged with a kind of obsessive order. In the center of the room stood an old oak workbench, its surface worn smooth with time. A low wooden stool sat before it, the cushions sunken into a familiar shape. Elena lowered herself onto the stool. On the workbench sat an open pocket watch. Its white face cracked the minute hand snapped at 2:17. She picked it up. Engraved inside the case was a tiny inscription, "To E.W. may you always find your way back." A.W. Elena frowned. She had never seen this watch before. A.W. perhaps her mother, Anna Westbrook, a woman who had once been a lullaby in her childhood dreams, and a void in every memory thereafter. Suddenly a faint sound behind her like metal tapping on glass. She turned. It was the grandfather clock in the corner. Its face had opened by itself without reason, without touch. She stood stepping toward it. The pendulum's rhythm now seemed different, slower, as if waiting for her. Her hand reached out hesitant and touched the glass, cool to the touch. Click. A soft snap. The minute hand jumped forward, and everything went dark. When Elena opened her eyes, she was no longer in the clock shop. Before her was a small kitchen with faded floral wallpaper, the scent of fresh pastries in the air, and the soft clinking of a spoon against a ceramic bowl. She was seated on a high stool, feet dangling above the floor. A gentle hand was tying her hair into neat braids. "Eat slowly, sweetheart, it's still hot," said a woman's voice, gentle, familiar. Elena turned, and her chest clenched. It was her mother, younger than she remembered. The same smile, the same eyes. Not a faded photograph, not a ghost. She wanted to speak, but couldn't. Her mother didn't notice the confusion. She continued cooing gently, placing a small piece of pastry on a plate. Then the door opened. A man stepped inside, tall, lean hair tinged with ash, but not the stern old figure of Elena's memories. A younger father, eyes weary but warm. In his hands, a small pendulum clock, wrapped in cloth. "I'll want me to teach you how to listen to the rhythm of time?" he asked. His voice was soft. She couldn't answer. The scene began to blur. The pastry scent faded. Elena jolted awake back in the old repair room. The same clock, the same dim light. She sank into the chair. Her heart was racing. Was that a memory, a dream? Or had the clock somehow taken her back to a forgotten moment in time? She looked at the grandfather clock again. It was silent now, as if it had completed its first task. Elena sat quietly on the old wooden stool, her hands resting on her knees, breath still uneven. Everything that had just happened, or maybe hadn't, left her mind, feeling fractured. She wasn't someone who believed easily in the strange or supernatural, but the vividness of the images, the sounds, the scents, they felt more real than any dream she had ever known. She looked again at the grandfather clock. The glass face had closed, and the silver pendulum no longer swung behind the glass. But on the wooden floor beneath it, something small and shining glinted in the dust. Elena bent down and picked it up. It was a key, small, made of brass, engraved with interlocking circles, the same symbol her father used to mark his special clocks. Her chest tightened. "What is this, Dad?" she whispered. No answer. Only the disjointed ticking that echoed through the shop, like thoughts too tangled for words. She held the key tightly, stood up, and began walking through the store. The clocks were arranged like a labyrinth, stacked and standing old and ornate. Each had a character of its own. Some were ticking, some silent. A few had small names etched on their sides: Margaret, 1953, Jonah, 1967 FH, repaired but never picked up, as if they were silent witnesses to human lives. Then she saw it. A German wall clock with a wooden frame carved with swans. Its clock face faded with time. At the center, a small circular lock, perfect for the key in her hand. Elena swallowed hard, inserted the key, and turned it gently. Click. The face sprang open, not to reveal gears or springs, but a deep, dark void. Cold air brushed the back of her neck. And then she was standing on an old staircase, holding a small pink suitcase, looking down into a shadowy living room. 8-year-old Elena was crouched under a table, holding her breath, eyes red, trying hard not to cry. "Daddy," she whispered. No answer. She stepped down each stair slowly, every footfall heavy like stone. From the dark, her father's voice rang out, angry, weary. "There's nothing more to say. Just go if you want to." The little girl turned. Her mother stood by the door, clutching her necklace. "Don't leave me here, Elle." And then everything vanished. Elena stumbled back into reality, her heart pounding. She steadied herself against a wooden shelf, breath ragged. This wasn't a sweet memory. It was something she had buried, something she had convinced herself she had forgotten. This shop, she thought, doesn't just hold time, it holds memory. Not all of them good, but not all of them bad either. Later that afternoon, Elena returned to her father's workshop. In the bottom drawer, she found an old leather notebook. No title, no cover, just pages of handwritten notes. One page had been marked more boldly than the others. Not every clock is meant to measure time. Some are made to remember, some to forgive. She placed her hand on the words and closed her eyes. The silence in the shop no longer felt haunting. It was the space she needed, space to touch the wounds that had been locked away, not to dwell in them, but to release them. At that moment, a soft chime rang from upstairs, clear, gentle, like an invitation. Elena had never known the house had an upper floor. She looked up. A small staircase sat behind a bookshelf nearly hidden by thick curtains. She stepped toward it. Each wooden step creaked under her weight. At the top was a small room, and in the center of the room there was only one object, a clock without hands. The room on the second floor was cold and silent. There were no windows, no lights, only a faint glow coming from the staircase behind Elena. The wooden floor creaked softly beneath each of her steps. In the center of the room, sitting on a low table, stood a tall clock almost chest-high. But it had no hands, no hour, no minute, just a blank white face with faded black markings as if time itself had worn them away. Elena stepped closer, her breath tightening. The clock was beating, not ticking, but thumping like a heartbeat. She placed her hand on the glass. Thump, 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 thump. As if the room itself was alive, as if it had been waiting for her. Elena closed her eyes. There was no more light, no more ticking. She stood in the middle of a wide open field, golden with dry grass. It was autumn. The air carried the scent of distant smoke and fallen leaves. In the distance was a small wooden house, the one she had lived in when she was 4. She saw a woman hanging laundry red hair glowing under the sun. Elena caught her breath. It was her mother, a little girl young. Elena ran around the yard, giggling, holding a long stick like a sword. Her mother looked up and smiled. "Where's my little princess?" she called out. Elena, the grown woman, wanted to move closer to embrace her mother, but her legs felt frozen. She could only stand there watching like a ghost no one could see. From the house, her father stepped out, young, vibrant with a smile she had never seen in her memories. He lifted the child, Elena, in his arms and spun her in the sunlight. The girl squealed with joy. It was a memory she never remembered, a perfect moment before everything fell apart. And then everything slowed down. Her mother looked away. A breeze rose. The man gently set the little girl down, said something Elena couldn't hear. And then the scene fractured like shattered glass. Everything vanished. Elena opened her eyes. She was still in the dim upstairs room, her hand resting on the clock without hands. Now the face of the clock had changed. A faint line of ink had appeared beneath the 12 o'clock mark, written as if by hand. Not all time is measured. Some time is remembered. Elena stepped back, her hand trembling, not from fear, but from truth. All her life she had seen her father through the lens of anger. She never once imagined that before he became a silent, distant man, he had once been someone who loved, who laughed, who hurt. And maybe he had tried to preserve something, through the clocks, not to fix the past, but so his daughter could understand it again. Elena slowly descended the stairs. The clock shop felt quieter now. The ticks blended together, no longer scattered and chaotic. She sat at her father's old workbench. In front of her lay the same pocket watch still missing its minute hand. For the first time, she opened the third drawer on the right, the one her father had always told her not to touch. Inside was a small box, and in the box, a letter. On the envelope, it read, "To Elena, when you're ready to listen." The letter lay silently in Elena's hand, as if it had waited 2 decades for this exact moment to be opened. She ran her fingers gently across the envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly, the edges a bit frayed, but the handwriting remained bold and firm. It was her father's. Elena took a deep breath, then slowly opened the letter. "Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer able to say these words out loud. And maybe this is the only way you'd truly listen. I know I did many things wrong. Not just once, but over and over, through silence, through anger, by letting you grow up with too many unanswered questions. But there's one thing you need to know and believe, that I never stopped loving you, even though I was never good at showing it, even though I carried a heart too heavy with memory. When your mother left, I didn't know how to be a father. I didn't even know how to be a man. I only knew how to be a clockmaker. So I did the only thing I understood. I tried to hold on to time. Every clock in the shop is tied to a memory, not just mine, but yours too. Moments I knew you'd one day need to revisit, not to forgive me, but to forgive yourself. If you decide to leave, I understand. But if you choose to stay, let the clocks guide you the rest of the way. They are storytellers who know how to keep secrets and how to lead you home. With love, Dad." Elena didn't cry, not because she didn't hurt, but because the pain in her chest had finally found its voice. She sat for a long while, clutching the letter, the words fading slightly in the dim shop light. For the first time, she didn't feel abandoned. She felt guided. That night, she lit up the entire shop. The light slipped through the shelves, reflecting off the glass of hundreds of clocks, creating a space that looked like a galaxy made of time. She opened each one not to fix, but to listen. One played a faint melody, a lullaby her mother once sang. Another had a small note inside Elena's birthday. Her first smile after her mother left. She trembled. Each clock was a fragment of time, not meant to be held onto, but remembered. And through those scattered, forgotten shards, Elena began to rebuild the story of her life, not as a child abandoned, but as a child once loved, however imperfectly. The next morning, Elena opened the shop door for the first time in 20 years. Not to sell, not to clean up, but to begin again. Outside, she hung a small wooden sign carved with the words, "The Clockmaker's Daughter, a place to remember." 3 days after reopening the shop, Elena found the final clock, buried deep in the bottom drawer, the one that had always been locked with a key she never found. No hands, no face, just a smooth black wooden box, ice cold to the touch. But when she laid her hand on it, her heart pounded as if her body recognized something before her mind could. She opened the box. Inside was an old wristwatch. The leather strap was cracked, the glass cloudy with time. Beneath it lay a small piece of paper with only one line: "The day everything broke, but you never did." Elena closed her eyes, and when she opened them, she stood in the familiar kitchen. It was raining. Thunder rumbled outside the window. Little Elena sat curled beneath the table hands over her ears, tears streaming down her face, shouting her mother, her father, accusations, voices choked by fury and pain. She wanted to run to them, to scream at them, to stop, to cry out, that she was still there, that she heard everything, that her little heart was breaking with every word. But no one heard, no one saw. Then the door slammed. Her mother walked out, shoes soaked with rain, never looking back. Her father stood in the middle of the room, fists clenched, his body trembling. His eyes flicked toward Elena, but held for less than a second, not a word. He walked into his workshop and shut the door. The little girl remained under the table, silent in the rain, as if she too had vanished. The memory faded. Elena sank to the floor of the shop, clutching the old wristwatch, her breath heavy. That was the moment that had defined her for 20 years. Not because her mother left, not because her father stayed silent, but because no one came back. But now she had come back. To hold that little girl. To say you were never forgotten. You survived, and I'm here because you were strong enough to wait. She stood, walked up to the second floor to the clock, without hands. She opened its case and gently placed the old wristwatch inside, and whispered, "We can stop here." For the first time, the clock made a sound, a single tick, then silence, not of sorrow, not of regret, but of closure. That night, Elena didn't dream, didn't remember, didn't mourn. Only silence full and whole. Time no longer passed as it used to. It didn't rush, it didn't drag, it didn't hide, it simply existed. Every morning, Elena opened the shop at exactly 9 a.m. Not because of an alarm, but because the light from the front window always fell on the same spot where her father used to stand. Like a silent appointment. She didn't sell clocks, she fixed them. But curiously, people didn't just come in for broken clocks. They came to sit, to wait, to tell. An old man with a pocket watch from the war. A young girl with a Hello Kitty watch her father had given her before leaving town. A woman who had lost her child, bringing in an alarm clock that no longer rang, but kept it as a reminder of mornings once filled with laughter. They brought pieces of time, and somehow Elena preserved them. Not with advice, but with presence. By listening to the quiet ticking the world had forgotten to hear. One day a young man walked in, 19 or 20, with tired eyes, and a weariness people his age usually hide behind a half-smile. "I'm not here to fix a clock," he said, sitting down. "I just wanted to ask, is there a way to make time go back?" Elena didn't answer immediately. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a small egg-shaped clock, no longer ticking. She set it on the table between them. "No," she said softly, "but you can stop making it your enemy." He looked at her, then laughed. A real laugh, not perfect, but true. Elena began to write, not a journal, but fragments of stories others had told her. Moments they remembered, regretted, forgave. She called the notebook the Book of Ticks. It didn't have dates, just small entries. The man brought a broken watch because his wife had passed. He didn't want it fixed, he just wanted it to stay silent. A 10-year-old girl said the wall clock was sad because it had been ignored. I agreed. A customer left an old clock behind saying, "If someone needs it to remember, please pass it on." I'm still waiting for the right person. A month later, Elena opened a special corner in the shop. A small table with a wooden sign that read, "The Timetable," Leave or take a piece of time. No one asked the price. No one needed to buy. They just gave. An old coach left behind, his stopwatch from his very first game. A young woman took a red alarm clock with a broken bell because it looked just like her grandmother's. And so time was passed on, not because it still ran, but because it had once held a heartbeat. Elena sat alone at the end of the day, surrounded by a room full of ticking. Not every clock was working, but all of them were still alive, like memory, like people, like her. One autumn morning, Elena woke earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, but because of birdsong outside the window, a sound she had long forgotten, but now felt like a gentle invitation. She made tea and sat at the counter, her book of ticks already open on the table pen waiting beside it. Sunlight slanted across the wall clocks, casting dancing beams of light through the quiet space. The shop was silent but not lonely. She wrote, "Some days time drifts like breath. No need to catch up, no need to fix, just be present." A soft breeze stirred a small photo hanging near the door. A little girl with braided hair smiling shyly beside a man in a worn apron holding a pendulum clock. Neither smiled brightly, but the smiles were real, and that was enough. Before closing for lunch, Elena added one last line to the notebook. "You don't have to go back and change the past. You just need enough courage to walk through it and carry the light." She closed the book, looked around. Every clock was still ticking, not in sync, not perfect, but alive. Like the human heart, each beat an opportunity. She smiled. Because for the first time in her life, Elena wasn't searching for home. She was already in it.